Tonight, let's slip quietly into an ancient world, settling in as a story of power and betrayal begins to unfold. You might imagine a soft breeze or a low, steady sound in the distance, easing your mind as we travel together. This is the story of Julius Caesar's final days, a moment in history that shows what happens when power grows faster than trust. Long before Caesar changed Rome forever, the Roman Republic looked strong and balanced on the surface. Senators proudly spoke of laws and traditions that were meant to protect Rome from any one man gaining too much control. But by the 1st century BCE, that balance was already breaking. Picture a table with one leg cracked, rocking with every small movement. That was Rome. Its lands stretched across the known world, yet its government was still built for a small city. Imagine trying to run a huge empire with rules meant for a local market stand. That was Rome's real problem. The Senate refused to admit anything was wrong, even as distant regions burned with unrest and corruption touched nearly everything. Bribes were no longer shocking. They were expected. Alliances changed so often that even the men making the deals could barely keep track. Promises vanished almost as soon as they were spoken. The Republic was not truly alive anymore. It was pretending to be. And then one man stepped forward, Julius Caesar. He was charming, ambitious, and frighteningly capable, carrying more energy than a room full of tired senators who had never seen real battle. Caesar didn't slowly work his way into the system. He struck it head on. He brought bold changes, massive public support, and a confidence that filled every space he entered. To the people of Rome, he felt like hope. He reduced debts, gave land to the poor, expanded citizenship, and hosted grand games that made daily life feel lighter. The crowds loved him deeply, and as that love grew, fear spread through the Senate. To the senators, Caesar was dangerous, not only because he had power, but because he knew how to use it. Roman politics was full of men who talked endlessly and achieved very little. Caesar was different. He got things done quickly. He didn't just challenge the system. He revealed how weak it truly was. The Republic didn't fall apart because Caesar attacked it. It cracked because it could not hold his weight. The senators slowly realized something terrifying. Caesar wasn't breaking Rome. He was showing everyone how broken it already was. And nothing frightens an old system more than being exposed. Long before Caesar became Rome's greatest political threat, he was its greatest success. You can imagine him as the kind of person who doesn't just finish a task, but completely outshines everyone else doing it. If Rome had awards, Caesar would have collected them all without trying. He wasn't born into unlimited power. He built everything step by step: his name, his wealth, his friendships, and his enemies. He climbed Rome's political ladder with relentless focus, each step marked by effort and risk. By the middle of his life, Caesar had become everything the Senate feared in one man: bold ambition, sharp intelligence, natural charm, military skill, and a rare bond with the public. Today, politicians dream of that kind of influence. In ancient Rome, men were killed for it. What made Caesar truly dangerous was not just his talent, but the results he delivered. While other leaders argued and delayed, Caesar marched into Gaul, conquered vast lands, and wrote about his victories as they happened. His messages to the Senate might as well have said, "Still winning." His success left Rome struggling to keep up with him. His soldiers loved him because he shared their hardships, led from the front, and rewarded loyalty. They followed him not just out of duty, but trust. He was the kind of leader people follow into danger without asking questions. And that loyalty would soon change Rome forever. The true dilemma, however, was this. No figure in Roman history had ever amassed such widespread popularity so swiftly. And you see, nothing unnerves politicians more quickly than someone the public likes better than them. Caesar's astounding victories brought him immense wealth, unparalleled influence, and legions of fiercely loyal soldiers, a collection of assets that, from the Senate's worried perspective, amounted to a clear checklist for a potential future dictator. The Senate yearned for generals who remained humble, easily controlled, and, ideally, stationed far, far away. Caesar was none of these things. He was relentlessly successful, undeniably charismatic, and alarmingly close to being utterly unstoppable. By the time Caesar concluded his conquest of Gaul, he didn't merely return to Rome laden with spoils and glory. He returned with momentum, a dangerous momentum, the kind that would stir senators from their sleep in a cold sweat, whispering pleas to the gods. Please, Jupiter, let him retire quietly, or at least move to Spain. But Caesar had no intention of retiring. He wasn't slowing down. He was only just beginning. And Rome was profoundly unprepared. By 50 BCE, Julius Caesar had achieved something truly perilous in the intricate dance of Roman politics. He had become too successful to be overlooked and too powerful to be controlled. The Senate attempted to contain him with the same futility you might try to rein in a whirlwind with a single bedsheet. Caesar commanded armies, boasted countless victories, enjoyed immense popularity, and possessed an unyielding ambition, a combination that, in Roman political language, was akin to wearing a sign that read, "Please consider my exile," or assassination. The Senate's proposed solution was deceptively simple. They ordered Caesar to disband his formidable army and stripped of the legions who adored of the legions, strint of spinipa, Asilia pument in with the plode of the propunda his to wear in with a word and view to gum wick you of I want to black but to the brother do the I try to you that you if I put it more a cock bit but so I've the story the air could word to go on to tell more be. You find yourself standing, not physically, but as a quiet observer, beside a towering figure, Julius Caesar. He'd received a seemingly innocuous message, a gentle suggestion to return to the city without his legions, a political plea wrapped in sweet words, yet he recognized it instantly for what it was, a velvet-gloved invitation into a treacherous alley across the distant hills in the heart of Rome. His adversaries, the formidable Pompey and the old guard, known as the Optimates, were already sharpening their legal blades. They waited, with a quiet, almost hungry anticipation, to ensnare him in a web of accusations the very moment his foot touched Roman soil. It wasn't about justice, you see, though every senator carried a few discreet transgressions of their own. No, their true desire was simply to erase Caesar, to reclaim the power that seemed to dim whenever he was near. They feared him not for his misdeeds, but because no one could quite shine when standing in his brilliant light. So, picture him now, at the edge of a narrow, unassuming stream, the Rubicon. In the quiet twilight of 49 BCE, he gazed across the water, a man poised on the brink of an irreversible choice, much like pressing send on a message that would forever alter the course of your life. The ancient Roman laws were crystal clear, etched in stone and history. A general leading his army across this border into Italy was an act of treason, an automatic trigger for civil war, an instant plunge into chaos with no possibility of retreat. He paused, feeling the cool breath of the evening, absorbing the gravity of that single, suspended moment. Then, with a quiet, almost imperceptible resolve, he stepped across. Legend whispers that he uttered words that meant the die is cast. Perhaps a more truthful translation, softer and more resigned, would simply be, well, here we go. With that solitary stride, a silent defiance echoed through the land. A tremor of panic rippled through the Senate, through Pompey, through nearly everyone except Caesar himself. He remained unruffled, you see, because he possessed the very thing Rome's elites feared most, an unshakable confidence, firmly rooted in undeniable competence. As he began his gentle march south, a quiet wave of surrender preceded him. Cities, one after another, opened their gates without a whisper of resistance. Many welcomed him with hushed reverence, while others simply drew their curtains, pretending not to be home, hoping he would pass them by unnoticed. Caesar wasn't merely fording a river, he was stepping across a threshold into political legend, his quiet footsteps shattering the fragile illusion that the Republic still held firm control. He made it clear, with every mile he covered, that if the Senate sought a confrontation, he would not only meet it, but dominate it. The Rubicon, in truth, was not just a river. It was Rome's final, silent warning, and Caesar crossed it as if he were simply a man, arriving punctually for his own destiny. With Julius Caesar's decisive step across that fateful stream, you could almost hear the collective intake of breath. Then a soft, almost imperceptible sigh as Rome's political class slid into what historians might call a state of profound disorientation. Their carefully laid plans, their subtle attempts to intimidate Caesar into a quiet surrender, dissolved like mist in the morning sun. This was primarily because Caesar simply refused to behave like a man who was expected to lose. In this swirling uncertainty, Pompey the Great, Pompeius Magnus, was gently nudged forward, presented as Rome's designated savior. It sounded impressive, certainly. Yet you might sense, even then, that Pompey was no longer the indomitable general he once was. By this point, he was more like a revered, retired celebrity attempting a comeback tour, his past glories a comforting echo rather than a vibrant present. He carried the weight of seniority, the luster of prestige, and a resume brimming with conquered lands. Yet he lacked one crucial element: momentum, that quiet, driving force. Caesar, in contrast, had just spent a decade tirelessly winning battles in the wild lands of Gaul, his legions honed to a fine edge. Pompey had spent those same 10 years navigating the intricate arguments of the Senate and diligently avoiding burdensome paperwork. You might feel, with a soft certainty, that these were not entirely interchangeable skills. Still, the Senate, in their quiet desperation, placed all their hopes upon him. They gently handed Pompey command of Rome's armies with a simple, almost pleading instruction. Fix this, Pompey, sensing he wasn't quite ready, emotionally or strategically, to face Caesar in an immediate clash, did what any self-respecting leader might do when caught unawares. He quietly evacuated Rome, explaining to everyone that it was all part of a grander strategy. His brilliant plan, you see, was to retreat to Greece, gather substantial reinforcements, and then engage Caesar from a safe, preferably very safe, distance. Caesar, on the other hand, had no need to gather forces. His seasoned soldiers were already with him, their spirits high, accustomed to winning wars before the sun had fully risen. So, He marched across Italy with the calm confidence of someone strolling through their own expansive garden, gathering supporters with the effortless grace of a medieval bard, attracting an audience. The inevitable confrontation arrived, almost with a whisper, at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE. Pompey possessed the sheer weight of numbers, the official backing of the Senate, and theoretically, a more advantageous position. Caesar, however, brought something different to the field, a deep well of experience, an uncanny adaptability, and an army so consistently victorious they had perhaps forgotten the very concept of defeat. It wasn't merely a battle. It was a living demonstration, a quiet study in contrasts as disciplined purpose met hesitant indecision. Pompey's forces, despite their numbers, simply unraveled like a loosely woven tapestry. Caesar secured a decisive victory, almost effortlessly. Pompey, his hopes shattered, fled toward Egypt, seeking a quiet refuge, only to be met by a reception committee that interpreted diplomacy as an unexpected and chilling act of finality. The Egyptians, with a grim efficiency, ended his journey, presenting his head to Caesar, perhaps expecting a quiet appreciation. But Caesar did not applaud. Pompey's death, you see, was not a cause for celebration. It was the quiet, definitive closure of an entire era. The Senate's old guard lost their champion, their anchor of stability, their last fragile illusion of control. With Pompey gone, Caesar stood utterly alone at the very pinnacle. No rivals remained, no counterweights, no brakes on the powerful vehicle he was now driving, unimpeded, straight into the annals of Roman history. The Republic hadn't quite fallen yet, but you could almost feel it swaying, a gentle tremor running through its ancient foundations. After Pompey's surprisingly quiet and rather unfortunate exit from the grand stage of history, Julius Caesar returned to Rome, a figure of undisputed authority, the champion of everything. The Senate, now acutely aware they possessed the negotiating power of a damp sponge, did their quiet best to adapt. Their new political strategy was elegantly simple. They would politely pretend to still be in charge, while gently bestowing upon Caesar every single title he desired. At first, they made him dictator, which was, in itself, not unusual. Rome had a tradition of appointing temporary dictators during moments of crisis. But these crises, you see, seemed to have a mysterious way of perpetually renewing themselves, mostly because Caesar continued to win wars, to quietly solve complex problems, and to reorganize the state in ways that, while efficient, left the Senate feeling increasingly superfluous. So, they made him dictator again and again and again. It became a quiet, almost melancholic running joke. Oh, another crisis. Better grant Caesar absolute power until it's tidied up. The Senate was, in essence, simply auto-renewing his subscription to ultimate authority. Then came the final, most significant promotion. Dictator, perpetuo, dictator for life. This was the political equivalent of gently placing a small, golden-bossed sticker on Caesar's forehead that quietly declared, "Yes, I am essentially king," and then softly suggesting the Senate simply be cool about it. To Caesar, this new title made perfect, logical sense. He believed he needed uninterrupted authority, a steady hand to rebuild a republic that, he felt, was collapsing faster than a poorly constructed Roman roof. He yearned for stability, for efficiency, for the ability to make swift decisions without having to seek permission from 50 men who couldn't even agree on what to have for lunch. To everyone else, however, this title glowed like a softly pulsing neon sign, silently announcing monarchy incoming. Romans, you must understand, detested kings with a fervor usually reserved for tax collectors and those who subtly cut in line. Their entire national identity, their very soul, was forged in the fiery crucible of asterisk, not asterisk, having a king. You could threaten Romans with famine, with war, with plague, and they would stand firm, resolute, but whisper the word rex, asterisk, king asterisk, and you could almost feel them surge into the streets, a quiet, growing murmur of outrage. So, when Caesar began to sit upon a golden chair, to don special, flowing robes, and even to have a month of the year softly dedicated to his name, these were not subtle hints. They were thunderous, yet quiet declarations that stirred an ancient, deeply rooted fear within the heart of Rome. Imagine now a slow, quiet transformation beginning to unfold around you. You see statues of one man, not merely grand, but placed with a chilling familiarity right beside the ancient gods themselves. You notice a month, then a year, subtly reordered, bending to his will. The whispers begin, soft at first, like the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Some senators, men you know well, friends perhaps, see this ambition, once a vibrant flame, now growing into an all-consuming fire. They speak of dominance, then, in hushed tones, of tyranny. And within you, a cold certainty settles, your own cherished influence. Once substantial and reassuring, feels as if it's melting away, like a delicate snowfall beneath a sudden, unexpected sun. You begin to imagine a future stretching out endlessly, where one man's rule casts a long, unyielding shadow. Your power, the very essence of your existence, seems to shrink, becoming merely decorative, like an ancient vase displayed in a silent gallery. The Republic itself, the very bedrock of your world, could become a relic, a silent exhibit labeled, "Look what we used to have." The chilling thought of this man as dictator for life isn't just a fear, it's a profound conviction that if you, and others like you, do not act, you will fade into obscurity, mere forgotten figures in a political landscape he is already meticulously reshaping. And nothing, you realize, nothing stirs a deeper dread in a politician's heart than the slow, quiet creeping of irrelevance. If there was one word that could send a shiver down your spine, one ancient echo that could unravel your composure, it was king, the very sound of it. Rex carried a weight of primal fear, a cultural aversion as immediate and instinctive as a modern person's unease with an unexpected, demanding phone call. Your entire republic, you recall, was built upon the proud, defiant memory of expelling the last king centuries ago, a collective act of liberation that defined your very identity. Monarchy wasn't merely disliked, it was viewed as a hereditary stain, a deep curse. So, as you began to notice Caesar adopting certain regal airs, a subtle shift in his demeanor, in his bearing, you could almost feel the sweat gather on your brow beneath the heavy fabric of your toga, as if you were trapped in a stifling chamber, surrounded by your most cunning adversaries. To be truly fair, Caesar did not awaken one morning and simply declare himself your sovereign ruler. He was far too astute for such bluntness. Yet, he accumulated honors with an almost magnetic pull, a quiet fervor that, when viewed through the lens of history, made Rome feel less like a republic and more like a carefully orchestrated, soft launch of a monarchy. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly, perhaps a uniquely adorned chair set apart from the others, a fine, ceremonial robe, more lavish than any you had seen, a statue, yes, amongst the gods, but now you find it hard to look away. Then, a month itself, given his name, woven into the very fabric of time. Such humble gestures, you might think, yet they carried a quiet resonance. The Senate, in its collective unease, continued to bestow these honors, for the unspoken truth was that denying Caesar was becoming increasingly perilous to one's political longevity. And Caesar, being Caesar, accepted every single one. Why wouldn't he? When symbols of divine authority are gently placed into your hands, to refuse them would almost feel impolite. But to the ordinary citizens, to those who watched from the crowded streets, these accumulating honors began to raise crimson flags, vast as naval sails, against the deep blue sky of Roman tradition. Then came the notorious Lupercalia incident, a moment that still echoes in your memory. It was a lively public festival, full of boisterous running, enthusiastic shouts, and the ancient strangeness of ritual. Amidst this vibrant chaos, you recall Mark Antony, with a flourish that felt overly dramatic, attempting to place a royal crown upon Caesar's head. The reaction from the crowd was instantaneous, a sudden, collective gasp, then a deep, resonant rumble, the ancient Roman equivalent, you realize, of an emphatic, absolute no. Caesar, with a performance that seemed almost rehearsed, refused the crown, not once, but twice, as if auditioning for the role of a reluctant monarch who secretly relished the suspense. But the damage, you sense, was already done. The people, in their wisdom, didn't quite trust Antony's theatrical gesture, and the Senate, in its growing suspicion, didn't quite trust Caesar's refusal. Everyone, it seemed, understood it for what it truly was, a quiet test, a silent query to gauge Rome's appetite for crowns. And the answer, loud and clear, was that Rome despised crowns. Rumors, like a sudden gust of wind, exploded across the city, swirling through every forum and market. Caesar, they whispered, wanted to be king. Caesar, they feared, planned to transform Rome into a monarchy. Soon, Caesar would rule like the old tyrants of legend. It almost didn't matter whether these hushed tales were entirely true. In the realm of politics, fear travels with a far swifter stride than truth. Senators, already burdened by anxieties over Caesar's ever-growing power, now saw him as a man dangerously close to crossing the one taboo Rome could never, ever tolerate. The Republic, you remember, had weathered corruption, endured devastating civil wars, survived tumultuous riots, and even staggered through endless incompetence. But a king was the final, unforgivable transgressions. To you, to so many of your peers, Caesar wasn't simply becoming powerful, he was becoming profoundly un-Roman, and that, in your quiet contemplation, was a crime deserving of the sharpest steel. If Rome had an unspoken motto during these turbulent years of Caesar's ascent, you might imagine it was this: we cherish powerful men right up until they actually become powerful. The Senate, you know, was filled with aristocrats who adored prestige, who reveled in their status, but who, at their very core, detested true competition. Their egos, you can attest, were vast and intricate. Their personal accomplishments, often their personal accomplishments, and their tolerance for anyone who truly outshone them was precisely riced, precisely eyes, precisely besides socks, perlias, Leslie slasses, sopilita, sosewa, and was to you, Ida again of Witka, tip, I will back up to that, to side to you, you are by with the father tell you time to buy what do I put you with you by my will. Then, into this carefully constructed world, stepped Julius Caesar, a man whose every victory, every triumph, made every other senator feel as though they had been merely guiding the machinery of Rome on autopilot for the past 5 decades. Your fear wasn't simply about losing political control. It was a deeper, more profound fear of losing relevance itself. And in a world where public honor was the very currency of your existence, irrelevance felt like a fate far worse than financial ruin. Caesar's dazzling victories made the Senate's own achievements seem like little more than glorified internship credits. Worse still, Caesar began to do the truly unthinkable. He bypassed the Senate entirely when faced with Rome's pressing problems. When senators stalled, caught in endless debate, Caesar acted. When they bickered amongst themselves, Caesar delivered tangible results. While they meticulously crafted lengthy speeches designed to criticize him, Caesar quietly authored concise laws that simply replaced their cumbersome processes. He made the intricate machinery of government move again, which was undeniably beneficial for Rome as a whole, but deeply, deeply inconvenient for men like you, who preferred that machinery rusted, jammed, and, most importantly, firmly under your own control. This is where the Senate's collective ego truly began to ache. Some senators, you acknowledge, genuinely believed that Caesar posed a direct threat to the very foundation of the Republic. Others, perhaps more honestly, were simply irked that they were no longer receiving invitations to the most prestigious banquets, the most coveted social gatherings. Many, you feel, harbored a deeper fear that Caesar's soaring popularity with the common people meant their own political opinions were fast becoming optional, like the easily overlooked fine print on a complicated loan contract. Even more unsettling was Caesar's unexpected act of mercy. He forgave his enemies. This gesture, intended to unify a fractured Rome, only deepened your unease, your terror. A forgiven enemy, you understand with a chilling clarity, is not a safe enemy. He is a man who knows he owes you his very life, and can, you fear, reclaim it whenever he chooses. The Senate, you realize, felt like a group of well-fed cats being gently stroked by a man who, you notice, always kept a sharp knife subtly tucked within his other hand, just in case. It was in this atmosphere of simmering dread and bruised pride that the conspiracy began to quietly take shape. A loose alliance of senators, united by 3 distinct, unsettling traits: their bruised egos, their rapidly declining influence, and a profoundly optimistic belief that everything would simply resolve itself, fall back into its rightful place, if only they could remove Caesar from the equation. This belief, you muse, required an almost boundless optimism, an unwavering conviction that deserved its own silent shrine. They convinced themselves, whispering in hushed tones, that they were heroes, true liberators, the steadfast guardians of the Republic. In truth, you sense, they were largely overconfident aristocrats, profoundly terrified by the undeniable fact that Rome's most capable, most effective leader was not, in fact, one of them. The Senate, in its public pronouncements and private assurances, told itself it was saving Rome from tyranny, but deep within, many, you suspect, were truly saving Rome from something far more terrifying to their fragile pride, a future in which Caesar succeeded, thrived, and ultimately ruled, entirely without their indispensable presence. Every great political disaster, you reflect, requires a project manager, a guiding hand. And for Caesar's impending assassination, that pivotal role fell to Gaius Cassius Longinus, a man, you observe, whose intensity was fueled by a complex blend of principle, ambition, and a truly impressive, simmering amount of personal resentment. If Caesar was the brilliant, all-consuming sun, Cassius, you imagine, was the figure standing perpetually in its deep, unforgiving shade, quietly muttering, "It's too much." And so we turn our gaze to a figure steeped in shadow, a man whose heart held a simmering resentment for Caesar, deeper than any casual disagreement. Imagine him, if you will, feeling perpetually outshone, as if the very brilliance of Caesar cast him into an unending dusk. This wasn't merely the annoyance of a colleague. It was a profound personal loathing, born from various streams. Perhaps you can understand the ideological clash, as he genuinely believed he was safeguarding the Republic. Then there was the sting of wounded pride, for Caesar's meteoric ascent relegated him to a supporting role in the grand drama of Rome. But beneath it all, a surprising and potent jealousy pulsed, a quiet conviction within him that he was, without a doubt, the superior strategist, the more astute politician, and certainly the more engaging conversationalist. Yet, as history would rather loudly attest, the world around him held a different opinion. Still, this man, Cassius, possessed a truly dangerous gift, a keen, calculating intellect. He wasn't the loudest voice in the Senate, nor the most beloved, but he held that crucial talent. Every hidden plot requires the ability to draw others into the delicate dance of danger. You could almost picture him, moving with a quiet purpose through hushed halls, entering a room filled with nervous, ambitious nobles, and emerging with new recruits and a whispered blueprint for change. He began to gather a secret circle of senators, bound by two threads, a shared apprehension of Caesar's power and a rather elevated sense of their own self-importance. This proved remarkably simple. Caesar's towering popularity had cast long shadows, creating a cohort of men who felt diminished, unacknowledged. Cassius, with the refined skill of a seasoned speaker, tapped into their insecurities, not to inspire them towards personal dreams, but towards a far more perilous form of political action. But Cassius, ever the strategist, understood a vital truth. Their venture needed a cloak of legitimacy. It required a face the public would recognize and revere. It needed Brutus. Marcus Junius Brutus carried a name that resonated deeply within the Roman soul, a lineage stretching back to the man who helped topple Rome's final king. His very presence would transform their conspiratorial whisperings from the grievances of disgruntled aristocrats into a noble quest for freedom. And so, Cassius embarked on a relentless courtship of Brutus. He would softly commend his unwavering moral compass, praise his deep well of wisdom, and gently, ever so gently, suggest that Caesar's ambitions might be growing a touch too kingly for the Republic's fragile health. You could almost see Cassius, a subtle influencer of his time, artfully planting seeds of doubt in Brutus's mind. Cassius didn't invent the idea of rebellion. He gave it structure, shaped its message, and infused it with a grim resolve. Without his quiet orchestration, Caesar's story might have unfolded differently. With Cassius, the Senate now possessed a design, audacious and ultimately tragic, but a plan nonetheless. If Cassius was the calculating mind behind the impending storm, then Brutus was its moral facade, a delicate veneer of virtue meant to obscure the true motivations of ego, apprehension, and bitter professional jealousy that simmered beneath. Brutus wasn't a man driven by cruelty. He was a man who felt the immense weight of expectation, gently pushed by the whispers of others. He was an intellectual, a philosopher, a man of ideals, who might quietly ponder Plato's wisdom, while others fretted over mundane seating arrangements. His reputation for unwavering virtue was so profound that you might almost imagine him rising each morning, bathed in a soft glow of civic righteousness. If Rome had ever conducted a poll for most likely to make the ultimate sacrifice for the Republic, Brutus would have won by an overwhelming margin. Cassius understood this deeply, exploiting it with the precision of a master marketer. He didn't need Brutus for his strategic brilliance, for that was not his strength. He needed Brutus because his presence alone made the unthinkable seem honorable. If Brutus declared, "Yes, we must strike down the dictator," then surely it must be the only righteous path. And poor Brutus, he genuinely believed it. He wrestled with the decision, an internal battle waged in the quiet chambers of his mind. On one side, he felt the warmth of Caesar's affection, their shared history of friendship and political patronage. On the other, the imposing shadow of his ancestor, Lucius Junius Brutus, the legendary figure who had helped cast out Rome's last king. In the intricate tapestry of Roman politics, one's family legacy was like a second spine, and Brutus carried his as both a privilege and a heavy burden. Everywhere he moved, hushed voices seemed to follow, whispering, "Your ancestor saved the Republic. What, then, are you doing?" Cassius, with the subtle force of a battering ram, leveraged this immense pressure. He painted vivid pictures of Rome, teetering on the precipice of monarchy, subtly implying Caesar saw Brutus almost as a son. Then he delivered the most dangerous of rhetorical blows. "What would your revered ancestor think of your silence?" That was the turning point. Brutus, in his earnest idealism, convinced himself that this act was not personal vengeance, but an act of profound patriotism. He reframed it in his mind as a philosophical imperative, a moral obligation, a solemn civic sacrifice. It sounded so noble until you remembered the man who trusted him, who cherished him, and who would never foresee such a betrayal. Nobility, you see, often walks a path through a tangled, messy landscape. When Brutus finally joined their clandestine ranks, the entire conspiracy underwent an astonishing transformation overnight. Senators who had wavered suddenly committed, others who had questioned the very morality of striking down their leader now thought, if Brutus believes it's right, then it must be so. Brutus didn't lend the plot brute force. He gave it an undeniable credibility, an aura of gravitas, the very elements that would lead to its tragic renown. In doing so, he ensured that Caesar's demise would forever echo through time, not merely as a political assassination, but as the ultimate, heartbreaking betrayal. History, you might notice, often offers gentle nudges, quiet suggestions like, perhaps today isn't the day to venture out. The Ides of March was one such pivotal moment, and Julius Caesar, in his formidable confidence, treated every single warning sign as an optional prelude, a tutorial he simply didn't feel compelled to complete. Let's drift back to the omens, for there were many. Strange storms brewed without reason. Animals behaved in unnerving ways. Mysterious visions flickered through minds, and prophets, with their knowing gazes, murmured ominous words. Beware the Ides of March. When one engages a professional seer, and that seer points directly to a specific date of peril, the most reasonable course of action, one might think, would be to simply stay home, perhaps enjoy a quiet meal, and avoid the bustling Senate entirely. But Caesar, as you will recall, was not a man swayed by mere reason. Then came Calpurnia, Caesar's devoted wife, shaken awake by a nightmare so utterly terrifying it jolted him from his sleep, a desperate plea on her lips for him not to leave their home. In her dream, she saw their grand house crumbling, a river of blood flowing through the streets of Rome, and Caesar, her beloved husband, perishing in her arms. It might have been just another unsettling Roman morning, yet this time she felt an absolute certainty that it carried a profound meaning. She begged him, implored him, even threatened him, using every persuasive artifice known to a determined wife, to cancel his appearance at the Senate. And for a fleeting moment, Caesar listened. He lingered at home. He even conceded that these swirling omens were indeed concerning. He began to tell his officials. You might imagine a moment of quiet reflection as the morning light barely filtered through the windows, when you, as Caesar, had already decided not to attend the Senate that day. Perhaps a sense of unease, a lingering dream, held you back. But then Decimus Brutus arrives, his presence a calm disruption. He speaks with a quiet assurance, his words a gentle balm to any lingering doubt. He tells you that your absence would be perceived as weakness, a trivial matter of superstition over a statesman's duty. He assures you of the senator's readiness to bestow even more honors upon you. And you, accustomed to the soft embrace of acclaim, find this persuasion far more comforting than the strange warnings of the night or your wife Calpurnia's very reasonable fear. And so, you see him now, stepping outside, turning away from the prophetic whispers that had filled Rome's air for hours, away from Calpurnia's anxious gaze, away from the sheer density of omens that seemed to shimmer in the morning light. A trusted friend, with a frantic urgency, tries to press a written warning into your hand, detailing the very plot against your life. But you, with a gentle dismissiveness, simply add it to your stack of letters to be reviewed later. A silent testament to a schedule too full, a mind too focused on the day's affairs. Every subtle sign, every hushed caution in Rome seemed to murmur, Julius, do not go to the Senate today yet. Your inner voice, perhaps a quiet echo of ambition, responded with just one quick stop. The Ides of March, you realize, was not an unavoidable destiny, but a path chosen, moment by quiet moment. Pride, the soft lure of politics, and the enduring image of a powerful leader gently eclipsed caution and intuition. And history, observing from a distance, began to slowly unfurl the most renowned and heartbreaking narrative twist of the ancient world. As Caesar, you now find yourself heading toward the theater of Pompey, a grand structure, yet one subtly tinged with irony. It bears the name of the man you once defeated in a bitter civil war, a stark reminder of a rivalry now quieted. Imagine, if you will, the gentle hum of discomfort in the air. Gathering for a significant meeting within walls dedicated to a vanquished opponent. It's not merely a location. It's a soft, lingering note of foreshadowing. As you approach, the crowd swells, a gentle tide of citizens eager to present their petitions and letters. Among them, another hand reaches out, holding a document containing a detailed warning of the conspiracy. But with your usual efficiency, you accept it, and without a second thought, you gently tuck it away, much like a casual piece of correspondence, promising yourself you'll review it later. A promise, you understand, that will softly, quietly, go unkept. Meanwhile, within those hallowed walls, the conspirators had assembled. You can almost feel the nervous energy, a suppressed tension, as if they were actors, about to perform a play they hadn't quite mastered. They had rehearsed the broad strokes, the subtle closing in, the opportune distraction, the dramatic thrust, but the details, the unpredictable human elements, a cry, a struggle, an attempt to flee, those had been left unscripted. It was a plan built on fervent resolve, rather than intricate design. When you, as Caesar, finally entered, the senators rose in unison, a ripple of togas and polite greetings. Brutus and Cassius, you might notice, exchange the briefest, almost imperceptible glances. Several of the conspirators unconsciously clutched the daggers hidden within their robes, their knuckles perhaps white, the concealed metal leaving faint impressions in their palms. You walk to your seat, completely unaware that you are about to take center stage in what might be described as the most tragically ill-conceived escape room of the ancient world. To begin their desperate act, a moment of distraction was needed. Julius Caesar steps forward, his petition extended, his movements perhaps a touch too earnest, a performance almost visible. He presents his plea then, with a nervous energy, gently tugs at your toga. You, as Caesar, respond with a mild, almost imperceptible snap of annoyance, a flicker of impatience. As this plays out, the other conspirators subtly shift, closing in, forming a tightening circle around you. It's a moment when you might have paused, might have felt the sudden density of bodies, and wondered, why is everyone standing so close? But, alas, your mind holds no suspicion. You have trusted these men, pardoned many, promoted some, shared meals and laughter with them. That deep well of trust, you now realize, is often the quiet, unsuspecting architect of profound historical downfalls. As the circle imperceptibly contracts, soft murmurs ripple through the group. Hands subtly adjust, and eyes dart nervously. Had anyone been truly attentive, the entire scene would have felt as natural as a pack of silent hunters casually circling their prey. This was no meeting at all. It was an ambush, meticulously woven into the fabric of political ceremony. And you, Caesar, confident, unguarded, and surrounded, sat serenely at its heart, about to learn the world's most painful lesson in the brutal realities of power. The plan, in its raw simplicity, was clear. Encircle you, create a diversion, then deliver a swift, decisive first blow. Yet they had overlooked a crucial human element. Julius Caesar, entrusted with this opening act, was, to put it gently, entirely unsuited for the role of an assassin. You can almost feel the tremor in the air as Caesar steps silently behind you, his dagger concealed within his toga, the immense weight of history pressing down on him. His singular task, to strike the most powerful man in Rome. One might expect a clear aim for a vital spot, the heart, the lungs, anything medically definitive. Instead, in a surge of pure panic, he delivers a clumsy, unexpected stab to your shoulder. It's not a strike of conviction, but of terror, akin to a startled poke rather than a deliberate attack. You, as Caesar, react instinctively. You whip around, your hand immediately grabbing Casca's arm, your voice sharp with disbelief, uttering a Roman equivalent of, "What on earth do you think you're doing?" This was not the silent, elegant act of assassination they had envisioned. Casca, now acutely aware of his own failure, lets out a choked gasp, a desperate plea for assistance. "Brother, help." This cry, though born of fear, acts as the signal. A ripple of movement, then a surge, as the other conspirators lunge forward, daggers now openly glinting, suddenly committed to this terrifying group endeavor in a way they never were in their whispered planning sessions. Chaos erupts instantly. Chairs scrape back and tip over, togas tangle in the sudden melee. Senators, not involved in the plot scramble for the exits, their flight a blur of robes and panicked motion. You, Caesar, fight back with a visceral ferocity. Though unarmed and encircled, the battle-hardened general within you stirs. You have faced armies, pirates, and the full force of political opposition. You are not one to yield quietly. You grasp Casca's dagger, shove another attacker away with surprising strength, your voice cutting through the din. scolding them like a disappointed father, witnessing an unthinkable transgression. But they keep coming, a blur of flashing daggers and wildly swinging arms. Precision is lost in the terror. Many of the wounds you receive are later determined to be accidental, inflicted by nervous hands, stabbing blindly in the crowded, frenzied space. It's less a coordinated assassination and more a chaotic, desperate panic with sharp, glinting objects. The attack swiftly devolves into a desperate melee. You stand, you stumble, you try to escape. Your eyes meet familiar faces among your attackers, men you had pardoned, men you had trusted, men you had elevated. Each new blow deepens not only your physical wounds, but also the profound, crushing weight of disbelief. And all because Casca couldn't aim. What was meant to be a swift, elegant, and symbolic execution of power instead became this, imagine, if you will, the clamor of that day, a sudden surge of violence, much like a startled flock of birds taking flight. But here, it's the glint of daggers and the muffled shouts of panic. You can almost feel the chill in the air of the Senate chamber, a stark contrast to the sudden, chaotic heat of the attack. Julius Caesar, amidst this whirlwind, was still very much a warrior, his reflexes honed by years of battle, dodging and parrying, grabbing at wrists, his voice booming over the din at senators who had never displayed such fervent energy in any debate. Yet, even in this maelstrom, a deeper, more profound devastation was quietly approaching, moments away. Through the blur of motion, through the desperate struggle for survival, his eyes met a face that sent a shiver through him, a face that belonged to someone utterly unexpected, Marcus Junius Brutus. The mere sight of Brutus, stepping forward with purpose amidst the attackers, struck Caesar with an emotional force far more crippling than any physical wound. Up until that point, this had been a bewildering, dangerous, and deeply treacherous event, but it hadn't felt intimately personal. But Brutus was different. He was a man Caesar had placed immense trust in, someone he had perhaps even loved, and certainly protected. He had extended forgiveness to him after the Civil War, with Pompey, promoted him, treated him with the affection and guidance one might give a cherished son, whether by blood or by bond. So, when Brutus raised his own dagger, poised to strike, something essential within Caesar's spirit shattered, long before his body would follow. The ancient whispers disagree on his final words. Some speak of Greek, others of Latin. Still others say he uttered nothing at all. But the powerful, enduring line, "Et tu, Brute, you too, Brutus," captures a truth deeper than mere historical record. It wasn't an accusation of "how dare you," or a cry of traitor. It was a simple, yet utterly devastating, recognition of complete and total betrayal. A quiet echo of finding out your closest confidant had secretly turned against you. In that heart-wrenching moment, as Caesar's gaze locked with Brutus, the will to fight simply drained from him, like sand slipping through an hourglass. His struggle ceased. With a quiet, dignified gesture, he pulled his toga up and over his head, a final shroud of privacy. It was a shield against the eyes of his betrayers, a last act of dignity, and perhaps a silent declaration that he was utterly done with this terrible meeting. For a man who had weathered shipwrecks, faced mutinies, navigated civil wars, escaped pirates, outmaneuvered political scandals, and endured a decade of relentless combat, this surrender was truly astonishing. But, as you can now sense, the cut of betrayal often runs far deeper than any blade of steel. With Caesar no longer resisting, a fresh wave of crude courage surged through the conspirators. The daggers continued to fall, clumsy and frantic, often striking each other in their desperate fervor to reach their intended target. When the chaos finally subsided, Caesar bore 23 wounds, yet the autopsy revealed that only one, truly, was fatal. The others, in a grim twist of fate, were merely enthusiastic marks of participation. Brutus, meanwhile, stood by in a profound, unsettling silence, perhaps attempting to convince himself of the nobility, the philosophy, the patriotism of his actions. Yet, even he must have felt the immense weight of what he had done, for in ending Caesar's life, they had not saved the Republic. Instead, they had extinguished the one individual strong enough to hold its fraying pieces together. In that moment, the conspirators believed they had liberated Rome, but instead they had forged a martyr. The Republic was now bleeding, and in the distant shadows, the very idea of an empire was already beginning to stir. As the last daggers withdrew from Julius Caesar, the conspirators, you see, envisioned a grand triumph. They truly believed they would emerge from the Senate chamber like heroes from a patriotic play, bathed in the adulation of cheering crowds, showered with gratitude, perhaps even offered lavish parades of victory. After all, they were convinced they had just rescued the Roman Republic from the grip of tyranny. Reality, however, held a far colder reception. The moment the deed was done, they burst forth from the Senate building, their voices ringing with shouts of liberty and freedom, as if Rome had been holding its breath, awaiting their dramatic entrance. Yet, instead of the anticipated roar of applause, they were met with a profound silence, a pervasive confusion, and the uneasy stares of a bewildered public. It was the quiet, awkward energy you might encounter when someone attempts to ignite a celebration, only to discover no one else has brought anything to share. The Roman public, you must understand, did not automatically embrace these men as saviors. They knew Caesar. They genuinely liked Caesar. He had offered them debt relief, provided food, organized spectacular games, brought a measure of stability, and crucially, he delivered tangible results. Most senators, in contrast, were known more for their lengthy speeches and their tendency to raise taxes. So, when these self-proclaimed liberators proudly announced they had saved Rome, the people responded with an unspoken question, a quiet Roman equivalent of, "Did we actually ask you to do that?" Panic then began to ripple through the city. Shops swiftly closed their shutters, doors were bolted, and people retreated indoors. Rome was not celebrating. No, Rome was bracing itself for the chilling inevitability of civil war, for history had shown time and again that assassinating powerful men invariably carried profound consequences. The conspirators, quite suddenly, understood they had a significant problem with public perception. Beyond the assassination, their plan was conspicuously absent. They hadn't even reached an agreement on who would govern after Caesar's demise. Their grand strategy, it seems, was simply eliminate Caesar. Republic magically restored. The second step, it was becoming painfully clear, required much more thought. Then came the funeral, a moment that meticulously dismantled any lingering hopes they might have harbored. Mark Antony, a master of timing and a weaver of powerful emotions, delivered a eulogy so compelling, so theatrical, it could have captivated any audience. He unveiled Caesar's blood-soaked toga to the assembled crowd, pointing with quiet deliberation to each stab hole, insisting all the while that he felt no anger, only a profound disappointment. Rome, in a surge of collective emotion, first erupted into raw grief, and then a slow, simmering fury began to ignite. The mob, now a tempest of emotion, turned its wrath upon the conspirators. homes were set alight. Statues of Caesar were lovingly adorned with fresh flowers. People cried out for justice, and by justice they meant nothing less than revenge. The self-proclaimed liberators suddenly found themselves trapped, hiding behind locked doors, bewildered as their brilliant scheme unraveled faster than a cheap toga caught in a sudden rainstorm. In killing Caesar, they had not preserved the Republic. Instead, they had utterly destabilized it, igniting the very fuse of civil war. Rome did not gain freedom. It lost its final, fragile chance at peaceful reform. And the men who had claimed to safeguard the Republic had, ironically, ensured its destruction. By the time the conspirators fully grasped that their Save the Republic plan possessed the structural integrity of a damp papyrus scroll, it was already too late. Julius Caesar lay dead. Rome simmered with a dangerous fury, and the political void he left behind was a chasm wide enough to swallow the entire Senate whole. The conspirators, in their naivete, had simply assumed that with Caesar gone, the Republic would magically revert to some idealized golden age. Instead, Rome reacted exactly as a state would, having just witnessed its most competent leader brutally stabbed 23 times by men who couldn't even organize a proper escape route. Into this swirling chaos, almost unnoticed at first, stepped a quiet, calculating 19-year-old. This was Gaius Octavius, better known as Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and designated heir. The conspirators, initially, barely registered his presence. They saw him as a polite teenager, perhaps a little frail, with no discernible power. Harmless, they thought, almost cute. This they would soon discover. And so, the grand ambition to restore the Republic, ignited by the assassins, became a profound error. You see, Octavian, young as he was, possessed all of Caesar's sharp intellect, yet none of his capacity for mercy. While those who struck down Caesar lingered in debates, uncertain who should address the public, Octavian moved with quiet determination. He was steadily forging alliances, gathering loyal supporters, and subtly taking command of Caesar's formidable armies. You wouldn't hear him shouting passionate cries for liberty, nor would he stir up angry mobs. Instead, he simply, almost serenely, went about the business of politics with the same relentless efficiency and chilling precision that Caesar once applied to war. Then there was Mark Antony, Caesar's trusted comrade, a seasoned general with a thirst for justice, or perhaps for power, and certainly a legendary capacity for indulgence. He yearned to avenge his fallen friend, to seize control, and perhaps to drink his way through a significant portion of the Mediterranean in the process. Eventually, these two formidable figures, Antony and Octavian, came to a shared understanding. Their mutual hatred for the conspirators far outweighed any animosity between themselves, and so they formed a powerful, if temporary, alliance known as the Second Triumvirate. You can think of it as a state-sanctioned quest for vengeance, complete with official funding. Their initial and most pressing task was clear: to hunt down every single conspirator. You can almost picture Brutus and Cassius, the lead conspirators, fleeing eastward, gathering what forces they could, preparing for what they imagined would be a climactic clash of ideals. But instead of a grand ideological showdown, they met their crushing fate at the Battle of Philippi. It was a defeat so absolute, so devastating, that both men chose to end their own lives rather than face capture. With their last breaths, the fragile dream of a restored Roman Republic faded into nothingness. Rome was left not with liberators, but with heirs to a fractured legacy. And as is often the way in Rome, with their common enemies vanquished, Antony and Octavian inevitably turned their attention and their weapons towards each other. It seems peace itself was anathema to the Roman spirit. Their simmering rivalry erupted into yet another civil war, a conflict that Octavian won with unwavering resolve. Antony and Cleopatra, united in their fall, were defeated, and Octavian returned to Rome, now the undisputed master of the entire Mediterranean world. In the year 27 BCE, he took on the revered name Augustus, thus becoming the very first Roman emperor. The Republic, that long and storied era, was gone. The empire was born, and all of it, you might reflect, stemmed from a group of ambitious senators who, in their short-sightedness, believed that 23 stab wounds could somehow mend everything. But as history gently whispers, it did not. Now, let's allow the currents of time to carry us far from Rome, across the centuries and the seas, to a different city awakening. The very first breath you might take in Tudor London is unlike any other welcome. It doesn't greet you gently. No, it presses against you like a thick, living presence, impossible to ignore. The air itself feels like a rich, complex stew. The earthy tang of brewing beer, the sharp bite of tallow smoke, the unmistakable scent of horse manure, the savory aroma of frying eels, the salty hint of human sweat, the damp, decaying smell of river mud, and, if you're perceptive, a lingering whisper of whatever flowed from chamber pots into the gutters the night before. Those born within these crooked walls scarcely noticed it, but for outsiders, it might make you gasp, perhaps even cross yourself, or blame some unseen spirit. Yet, this was London's signature, its very essence, the olfactory price of being the kingdom's busiest, loudest, fastest growing heart. As the sun begins its slow climb, casting soft hues over the timber-framed houses, their upper floors seem to lean inward, like old women exchanging hushed morning secrets. You might observe a milkmaid, her steps delicate, navigating puddles of unknown origin. A baker, already glistening with effort, pulls open his shutters, his voice carrying as he playfully scolds a boy chasing a flapping chicken down the narrow lane. Just across the way, a woman efficiently empties her night bucket into the flowing gutter below, uttering the customary warning cry, though it's barely a murmur now, for everyone instinctively knows to keep their heads lowered in these early hours. And yet, despite the pervasive aroma, the constant dampness, the city pulsates with an undeniable, vibrant life. The street hawkers are among the very first to stir. Their calls, rhythmic and practiced, begin to weave through the dawn air. Hot pies, fresh pies, one cries, oysters, 6 for a penny, another chants, old clothes. Bring out your old rags. Their voices layer upon each other, creating a kind of chaotic, yet strangely harmonious, melody that defines London mornings. Carts, heavy and creaking, begin their rumble across the uneven cobblestones, pulled by horses that appear as weary as their owners. Apprentices, light-footed and swift, dart through the winding alleys, delivering messages, fresh bread, or bolts of cloth, skillfully dodging dogs, the occasional still-drunk citizen, and even a runaway pig. Every alleyway seems to be a contest of speed and sound, as if the entire city is striving to be heard first, to make its presence known. A gentle mist of rising smoke mingles with the river fog, casting a soft, blurring veil over everything, momentarily softening the city's rough edges, at least until the day fully brightens. Then, as the light strengthens, the unvarnished truth of London slowly reveals itself. the peeling paint on aging timber, the perpetually muddy streets, the patched roofs, and the wooden signs swinging with a clatter in the breeze. It isn't beautiful in the gentle, pastoral way a countryside village might be, but it is undeniably alive, endlessly alive. This very first breath of Tudor London whispers its true story to you. Here, survival and opportunity walk hand in hand. The streets may hold their strong aromas, the alleys may feel impossibly narrow, and the noise may gently rattle your bones, yet the city is utterly awake. And whether you are ready or not, it quietly insists that you wake with it too. And if you allow that ever-present scent, strong enough to guide even the blind, to draw you deeper, you will eventually reach the bustling realm of the fishmongers. Their stalls clustered densely near the Thames, along the narrow streets close to Billingsgate, where the river's ceaseless tide brings both abundant opportunity and inevitable chaos. Here, the trade of fish dictates everything: the relentless noise, the demanding labor, the very mood of the day, and even the natural rhythm of life itself. Even before the sun fully clears the horizon, these stalls are already teeming with life. Crates of wriggling eels, the silver flash of slippery haddock, the gleaming scales of salmon, and towering piles of shellfish that seem to gaze back at you with a silent, ancient wisdom. The fishmongers themselves are a distinct breed. Their hands, you might notice, are permanently imbued with the briny scent of salt water and the earthy aroma of fish guts. Their aprons, stiff with dried scales. Their voices, when they shout prices or mock arrival, are loud enough to echo through the morning air, perhaps even drowning out distant church bells. They might argue fiercely with customers, as if every single penny is a matter of life or death itself. But beneath this boisterous exterior lies a profound, almost inherited skill. These men and women can clean a fish in mere seconds, identify the very freshest catch by touch alone, and often assess a customer's budget before a single word has even been spoken. Apprentices, small and nimble, dart around them like frantic shadows, burdened with baskets heavy enough to curve their young backs. A single misstep, a dropped sturgeon, a cracked container of oysters, and they are met with sharp curses, swift slaps, or the sting of public humiliation. Yet many rise through these harsh ranks, for fish is one of the city's most potent currencies. Taverns depend on it, inns rely on it, and even the poorest households somehow stretch their few pennies to buy salted herring, the unofficial, sustaining food of the working class. Around the stalls, the ground is perpetually damp, a glistening mosaic. Tiny scales cling to your shoes, while fish guts stream into shallow trenches. Above, gulls swirl and cry, like opportunistic aerial thieves, poised to dive at the first unattended scrap. Cats, sleek and patient, weave between barrels, their quiet vigilance often rewarded by careless children or utterly exhausted workers. The noise here is relentless, the sloshing of water, the rhythmic clinking of blades, the traders' arguments, the buyers' haggling. Yet it is more than mere commerce. It is a spectacle. People often drift here simply to observe the vibrant chaos. Housewives, seeking the chatter, gradually begins to soften, the last echoes of lively gossip dissolving into the crisp air. You might still see travelers pausing by the empty stalls, studying them as if witnessing the silent after-effects of some ancient, bustling ritual. Even a few nobles, their finery hidden beneath simple cloaks, might have lingered just moments ago, drawn by the raw, vibrant drama of London's early morning fish trade. But now, as mid-morning light warms the cobbled lanes, The final catches have found their buyers, the unsold carefully preserved through salt or smoke for the day to come. The fishmongers' powerful voices have finally settled into quiet rest. Apprentices, their work ethic still strong, methodically scrub the stone surfaces clean, washing away the evidence of the day's toil. And as they do, the gentle river breeze drifts back, no longer battling the market's cacophony, but carrying with it the subtle, briny promise of the next incoming tide, a quiet whisper that tomorrow's spirited contest will begin anew, long before the sun even contemplates rising. Yet, even on days when London basks in a warm, golden glow, a subtle shadow always seems to stretch long in the narrow, winding lanes. It is the persistent memory, the ever-present threat of the plague. It never truly vanishes, this invisible menace. Sometimes it merely slumbers, a low hum beneath the surface of daily life. Other times it stirs with a terrifying intensity. And when quiet rumors begin to unfurl like unseen banners, when a neighbor's cough sounds just a little too hollow, or a child's sudden collapse is witnessed in the street, that's when people start to gaze apprehensively at the turning of the alleys, searching for a figure they fear more deeply than any common thief or stern tax collector. You'd know him immediately, the plague doctor. He would appear like a grim, foreboding omen, encased in his heavy, waxed leather, his face entirely concealed behind that grotesque, beaked mask. Inside the beak, you can almost imagine the potent aroma of herbs, vinegar-soaked sponges, and the faint scent of desperate superstition, all believed to ward off the pestilence. This long, unnerving snout made him seem less like a man and more like a creature sprung from the depths of a nightmare. Yet, in Tudor London, he was both profoundly dreaded and grimly essential. Children would instinctively melt away, hiding behind sturdy doorways. Housewives, their faces pale, would quickly make the sign of the cross. Shopkeepers, their expressions somber, would hastily slam their wooden shutters closed, hoping to seal death outside their walls. The plague doctor moved with a deliberate, unhurried pace, navigating the cramped alleys that were often barely wide enough for his imposing form. His heavy wooden cane would tap against the stones, not merely to steady his steps, but to carefully prod at the ailing from a safe distance. Every sound he made, the soft crunch of his footsteps, the rhythmic tap of his cane, the rustle of his leather robes, carried an unmistakable warning, a somber announcement. Death was near. Behind him, you might see the watchful figures of town officials, whose grim duty it was to mark the infected houses, hammering stout boards across their doors and windows, sealing families inside, until the disease itself rendered its final, terrible judgment upon them. Within those sealed homes, the atmosphere was thick with despair. Straw bedding, meant for rest, instead reeked of sweat and palpable fear. The air hung heavy and stale, almost unmoving, clinging to everything. Windows were small, their panes often murky, and they were rarely, if ever, opened. Beneath the floorboards and through the shadowy corners of pantries, rats would scurry, their tiny movements unknowingly spreading the fleas that carried the invisible enemy. Even families, still in robust health, dreaded the doctor's arrival, for an accusation of illness could mean immediate imprisonment within their own walls. And once those boards were nailed across a neighbor's door, the street itself would be studiously avoided, as if the very alley had become cursed, tainted by proximity. Yet, for all the profound dread they inspired, these plague doctors were not possessors of magic. They were simply men, working with the crude tools of their time. leeches, poultices, herbal concoctions that were little more than hopeful guesses. Some carried sweet-smelling pomanders filled with rosemary and lavender, genuinely believing that pleasing scents could repel disease. Others would burn strong pitch or sulfur, hoping the acrid smoke would purify the air. Their actual medical understanding was incredibly limited, but their raw courage was undeniable. They walked willingly into danger long before anyone else dared to follow. When the doctor finally departed a house, the silence that settled behind him was profoundly heavy. Sometimes he left a fragile flicker of hope. Other times he left only the crushing weight of grief. And the inhabitants of Tudor London, hardened though they undoubtedly were, would whisper fervent prayers each time his dark form turned a corner, fervently hoping that his next visit would not be to their own doorstep. If the bustling fishmongers brought London its distinct morning scent, and the somber plague doctors cast its deepest shadows of fear, then the street hawkers provided its very heartbeat. From the moment the sun began to paint the sky with its first delicate hues until the very last glimmer of daylight gently faded, they filled the cobbled streets with a constant, unwavering chorus of sound. These spirited sellers were London's unofficial messengers, its impromptu entertainers, its resourceful marketers, and, at times, its charming irritants all rolled into one. They offered everything imaginable to the passing crowds: savory foods, glittering trinkets, dubious remedies, practical services, and, of course, the freshest gossip. And they sold it all with a powerful, unmistakable loudness. Every hawker possessed a unique signature cry. You might hear a pie seller, his voice raw from effort, belting out hot pies, hot beef pies, until it began to crack. A seller of needles and pins would often chant in a half-singing, rhythmic drone, a steady counterpoint to the city's roar. A quiet woman, offering small sprigs of lavender, would walk slowly, her voice soft, providing a fleeting moment of fragrant peace for anyone overwhelmed by the city's pervasive stench. Children, often selling simple matches or apples, would shout over one another, as if sheer volume alone might somehow conjure coins from the pockets of passers-by. The cumulative effect was a non-stop soundscape, an intricate tapestry woven equally from the threads of commerce and cheerful chaos. These hawkers moved with an almost instinctual grace, darting like fish through London's perpetually crowded alleys. They had to. The very street space was a constant, shifting battlefield. Heavy carriages would rumble past without any hint of slowing. Butchers, unconcerned, would simply dump bloodied water into the gutters. Housewives, laden with baskets, would jostle forcefully for a sliver of room. Apprentices would sprint by, rushing deliveries. A street hawker quickly learned that even a moment's hesitation meant losing both their precious space and a potential sale. Swift feet and powerfully loud lungs were not just useful, they were absolutely essential tools for survival. Many hawkers were women-resilient widows, single mothers, or wives diligently supplementing their household income. They understood their customers intimately, knowing who might be soft-hearted, who was notoriously stingy, and who would haggle with a fierce determination until the very heavens seemed about to collapse. Others were children, too young to begin formal apprenticeships, yet old enough to contribute meaningfully to their family's survival. Some were orphans, relying entirely on a fickle combination of luck and sheer persistence. In a city where no safety net existed, selling a modest basket of goods could literally mean the difference between enjoying a warm dinner and going to sleep with an aching, empty stomach. But hawkers offered more than just tangible products. They were vital conduits of news. Gossip, that potent currency of the streets, would ripple through their ranks faster than the plague through a rat's nest. They knew which noble had lost a fortune gambling, which merchant was soon to be wed, which tavern was watering its ale, and which neighbor's daughter was secretly meeting a tailor's assistant behind the stables. If London held a secret, a hawker had almost certainly heard it first, and invariably shouted it second. Crowded markets, like the famed Cheapside and Smithfield, transformed into vibrant open-air theaters, where hawkers battled fiercely for attention. A truly skilled seller could make a throng laugh, cheer, or gasp with delight. A clumsy one, however, would be instantly ignored, swallowed effortlessly by the city's ceaseless noise. Through their cries, London breathed. Through their spirited exchanges, London talked. And in their voices, shrill, stubborn, and brimming with life, you could truly hear the authentic, pulsing rhythm of Tudor daily existence.